Riding in on the content coattails, I'm the Indie Nomad, and I'm here with a bit of a video experiment. What's to come is a breakdown of my first 10 hours with Cyberpunk 2077. The ups, the downs, and the fun stuff in between, it's all here, topped with a light dusting of healthy critique. To spare myself the joys of uploading a 10-hour video to YouTube though, I cherry-picked the noteworthy stuff and then fed everything through one hell of a fast forward. Before we get started though, I should probably address the elephant in the room. Cyberpunk 2077, depending on your console, your setup, and your luck, can be described as anywhere from kinda wonky to a downright unplayable mess. Running on a fairly beefy but slightly outdated PC, I've been fairly fortunate in my play experience, with a fair few visual glitches and the occasional flagging hiccup, but nothing particularly game-breaking. Regardless of my personal experience though, it's a pretty easy statement to make that CD Projekt Red fumbled the ball on this one so hard that I think it achieved escape velocity. I'll get back to that thought a little later, but in the interest of not bogging down the intro any further, let's get this video started. We got 10 hours on the clock, and go! And stop! My first hurdle, the installation process. This one mainly feels like my nature is a magnet for technological entropy, so between me and Steam and CD Projekt, the specific blame for this one doesn't really matter. It was a funny series of events though, so let's quickly break down how my launch day went, accompanied by this handy chart. Preloaded Cyberpunk on Steam on the 9th. Launch day comes around on the 11th. The Day 1 patch, which was public knowledge at this point, so not a surprise, starts at 11 AM. In the meantime, I wandered down to my local EB to pick up my partner's copy. Through various hoops, we got 2 copies for a total of $35. Minor brag, all thanks to her. I return home and find GOG servers are currently on fire because half the planet just tried to use them all at once. Struggled through the server issues and managed to get her game installing around noon. At 1:12 PM, my update is finally finished and I rush to boot Cyberpunk, which promptly crashes. A game cache verification shows that there was a corrupted update file. Steam decides then to functionally reinstall Cyberpunk. At 2:47 PM, my partner's copy is fully installed. And at 4:02 PM, 5 hours after launch, having pre-installed it days prior, my copy of Cyberpunk is finished, updated, and ready to go. So that was a whole thing. I need at least something to base this video off though, so let's just dock the timer 2 hours and keep on rolling. Character creation is fairly standard as character creation goes. The selection on offer contains a decent enough variety of facial features while not being quite as granular as sliders might allow. A badass female V sounded like fun to me, so I went for both the feminine body and voice options. I'm not the best at faces, so with the assistance of a reference, I went for somewhat of a Mass Effect femship vibe, or at least as close as I could. Impossible not to touch upon when discussing Cyberpunk's approach to player avatar, the fluidity of gender options is a nice consideration, with masculine/feminine body types and voices independently selectable, along with a variety of preferred genitalia, or lack thereof. It's unfortunate then that the handling of genre in the game's marketing and wider discussion was so much less tactful. Whew. A heavy subject and a hard act to follow, but let's press on. I went for the Nomad as my origin, as much for being on theme as general preference. A nice, gentle lead into the wider world, the opening does a fair bit of initial legwork. Among this work, the introduction of lore and world elements, driving mechanics, dialogue, and so forth. Also, a fun intro to our good lad Jackie, the both of you coming together on this job while being fairly green at this whole criminal smuggling thing. That being the case, things of course go sideways and you both get away by the skin of your teeth. All of this, as it turns out, to steal a lizard. Unexpected, sure, but in fiction, iguanas apparently went extinct 30 years ago, meaning to the right buyer, this is one hell of a payday. A payday big enough, in fact, that it sets you up nicely as you begin your new life in Night City. After a quick montage covering the subsequent 6 months of you establishing said new life, comes the combat mission tutorial. The combat is good if unremarkable. The weapons feel punchy and powerful, even if their impact is somewhat hamstrung by enemies that need a few too many bullets to take down. This is admittedly a critique mostly addressed over the course of play as your avatar power increases. Similarly, solid but with caveat, the game feels expansive and interesting, but when you turn down an alley and get to watch character models slowly phase from low poly to interactable, any earned immersion quickly drains away. Surprisingly similar to the looter-shooter subgenre in a few ways, think Borderlands, Destiny, and so on, a good chunk of the game consists of vacuuming up slightly better gear after every fight. That's admittedly not saying much though, as The Witcher 3 was much the same for a significant portion of its play as well, and at least to Cyberpunk's credit, the various weapons feel unique. Sorry Geralt, but all your swords play exactly the damn same. In the interests of wider discussion, insight gained from post-10-hour play shows this rate of gear cycling slows considerably, as the players become more able to upgrade and maintain specific weapons and armor, so personal favorites aren't actively detrimental to hold on to. The skill trees and attributes are pretty boilerplate as RPGs go. The attributes mainly operate as progressive requirements for cyberware and specific world or dialogue interactions, but I've yet to notice them do anything truly transformative. A couple of examples come to mind to illustrate this dissatisfaction, one from world design and the other from dialogue. In the world, a character with a high body stat may be able to wrench open a door with sheer strength alone, but, sure enough, there'll be another equally useful entrance around the corner gated by a different attribute. In a more confident RPG, this might allow me the benefit of talking my way through or out of various conflicts or situations. But 50 hours in, and I haven't seen a single dialogue option gated by cool actually do anything connected to my play experience. What's more concrete about attributes are their connections to perks. These perks take the form of skill trees, limited by the level of the related attribute. For example, pistols, rifles, and blades all fall under reflexes, so each of those trees can only be advanced as far as you've leveled to reflexes. While there are a few standout gems among the variety, the perks for the most part are mostly uninteresting. Honestly, the worst offenders are simply boring and unimaginative. Just thinking about plus 3% rifle damage makes my eyes heavy. Now the characters, them I like. Go figure the writers of The Witcher could do good character work. All the characters more involved in the plot are complex and interesting, each with their own outlooks, goals, motivations. Even the smaller roles feeling fitting and evocative, all the minor characters having their own cool gimmicks. Because I obviously can't help myself, I mainly ended up doing a variety of smaller side quests over the initial 10 hours. These quests, with their various framing devices, mostly shake out to kill all the bad guys in X place, and then sometimes save the hostage or grab the objective. Although, to the devs' credit, even the most basic of these side quests includes some form of micro-story ranging in quality from simply extant to notably impressive. Near the end of my time, I tackled my first proper story mission, and it didn't disappoint, involving all the classic elements beat by beat. Meeting the shady fixer, doing a legwork, the approach, the handoff, things going sideways, all presented and to my understanding fairly open with potential outcomes. My V, as previously stated, is cool as a cucumber, so the way my mission played out was walk into a dangerous building, have my life threatened a couple of times, kept my cool, made some smart decisions, closed the deal, and had everything go sideways when outside forces came into play and things became decidedly more chaotic. My partner, on the other hand, suffered an unfortunate glitch in her playthrough, causing all potential enemies in the mission area to immediately aggro on her. Even more unfortunately, this forced her to fight through a manic tide of foes to reach the same objective I reached through tense but peaceful negotiation. This glitch even had the knock-on effect of causing the game to flag as her siding with a particular faction and influencing events dozens of hours later. To round things out before we get into my closing thoughts, I threw together a montage of various notables throughout my playtime. Leading off with the fun stuff, I only hit a few decent bugs and glitches, mostly to do with object clipping and pop-ins. A bit of an anticlimax to the first mission. An exciting car chase and gunfight ain't so exciting when the van looks like a surreal rectangle and your gun shoots without the feedback that usually tells you you fired a gun. Short one next as I head into a chat with a friendly neighborhood ripperdoc, and the stairs down to his shop decide they don't like me very much and kill me on a whim. Thank you, quick save. The tense and interesting meet with Fixer Dexter Deshawn. Your character raises the point that this could have all happened over the phone, but he wanted to get your number face to face. So you'll pardon my initial thought that he's a goddamn telepath or something when his facial animation doesn't trigger and he talks for a nice long while without the important step of moving his mouth. Later on, in my main mission, I had to follow my short-term NPC buddy Dum Dum, spelt like the especially nasty kind of ammunition. I got the sneaking suspicion he was the other kind of dumb though when he glitched out in the middle of a pitched battle and stopped me from progressing until I reloaded a prior save. Weapon swaps next, and your preferred weapons are basically a matter of personal preference. I went from shotguns and pistols early on, before later settling into a more comfortable setup of snipers and assault rifles, as, at least in the early game, ranged stealth isn't as much of an option as I was initially hoping. Secretly, a game about wearing as much trash as you can, Cyberpunk is a premier source of bad looks. A significant portion of the game, a constant choice between the safety of using better statted gear as you find it, and the style of finding a look that really works. Even if that style means you're worse off against the pesky issue of all the people that want to kill you. Lastly, unless you're real big on your melee build right from the get-go, I would suggest not trying out the bare-knuckle side quests right away. Notably, I began the game as a lightweight, stealth-focused Farstalker, and as such had functionally no melee ability to speak of. Obstinate as I am though, I still gave it a shot, and subsequently got my ass kicked over and 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 so on. A total of 20 tries and far too many minutes was what it took to convince me my time might have been better spent elsewhere. Little things next. Not bothering with a montage on these as they take way more editing work than they're worth. Cars swapped. Big fat zero. Hijacking cars is gated by your body stat, and my V is not really what you'd call above the minimum body attribute. People shot through walls. A hilariously high number, bless all these wonderful sniper rifles. Time said oof at the brutality. Not that many, actually. Oh, God, what a game's doing to me. Time's gone wow. Occasionally. The jank, again, really tamps down on that wow factor. Stuff looted. So much random stuff. If my character didn't automatically dismantle junk, I would have cornered the market on ashtrays by now. If you asked me how I felt about the game at the 10-hour mark, I would have said it was a fairly fun, promising, yet unfortunate experience. With the play clock now hovering around 60 plus hours, that summation hasn't really shifted very much at all. The more I play though, the more that opinion deepens, gaining caveats and complexities. Meeting new, interesting characters, exploring the sprawling game map and so on are all terrific and welcome. The more I find to enjoy about the game though, the more I find that holds it back as well. The rote, Ubisoft-style events that populate the world, barring the rare short story gem. The unremarkable RPG aspects. The bare minimum variety of cyberware. All things with the potential to be transformative or noteworthy, constrained by a safe approach to an inherently subversive genre of fiction. When everything does line up though, when the jank is out of sight and the world sprawls around you, Cyberpunk 2077 does sing, if only quietly. Cyberpunk 2077 exists in a weird space. It was overhyped from without and within, expected to live up to one of the greatest games of all time. Extremely poorly managed and distastefully marketed, yet extremely well-selling. The twin facts that development costs were recouped on pre-order revenue alone, and, according to some sources, a full third of that revenue was lost to returns and refunds, speaks volumes. All that said, at the 10-hour mark, and again at the 60, on the balance I'd still recommend it. The heavy caveat there being if you had any hesitancy at all to wait a few months before you try it. Cyberpunk a few months from now is going to be an utterly different beast from what we got at launch. Oh, and here's looking forward to some DLC. The DLCs for The Witcher 3, Heart of Stone, and Blood and Wine were two sublime narrative experiences, and if they can recapture even a bit of that magic, it will be incredible.